LemonAmiga presents a Playguide video review. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hey there once again, welcome to another LemonAmiga Playguide and review. This time we'll be taking a look at Metal Law, designed and released in 1992 by New Bits on the RAM, aka Audios, aka Kaiko. Begins with an animated introduction, and after, of course, we get a thumping heavy metal music soundtrack in this title sequence where we can see a few bits of information about the game. And well, I'm not quite sure if Wilhelm Geetz is an actual programmer, but Andreas Breebrook in this case was Peter Thierolf of Kaiko, and the graphics were created by Frank Matzk, of course, of Kaiko under a pseudonym, and of course the music was Rudolf Stember, and the title music was Chris Hulsbeck. We can press F1 for one player mode or 2 for two player mode, and I think we take it in turns to play the game. You can see I've had one practice go already, and that went quite well. So without further ado, let's press that fire button and check this game out. In Metal Law, we play as a character much like the Turrican games who can run and gun his way through the action, and in this game he can fly somewhat all the way off the top of the screen. We can also duck and jump like usual, we can also fire our weapons, and we can even move our way through that landscape. By pulling down and pressing fire, we can drop straight through this platform, and we can drop straight through a number of platforms in the game. At certain points we will find crystals, and they will give us a bonus score, or they will top up our firepower, and topping up our firepower is necessary in this game because you can't always rely on those enemies to stay put, and so wider firepower in this case would have hit the enemy. In this case I'm actually struggling to do so, so luckily you don't have to kill everything on the entire level to progress. Unfortunately, unlike a Turrican game, we cannot simply jump on the enemies' heads to kill them, we have to blow away with our firepower, and similarly with the tokens, we can't just collect those straight away, we have to highlight them and then collect the token. And that's not usually so bad, but the crystal you can see down there is actually an extra life, and even if we do activate the extra life, we still have to collect it, which is easier said than done. You can see me struggling to do that right now, and it's easy to lose a life just like that without collecting it, and that means that that kind of thing is kind of a red herring on this level, and you'll probably save lives by ignoring it. Choosing to wisely run away from that death trap, I am actually persevering with the level, and if you carry on for long enough, then the game should award us some extra energy, just like that, some more bonuses, and some more firepower, and we really need to conserve that firepower by not dying in the game. You can see we're already up to a ball firing weapon, which fires a small ball of fire down towards those enemies, and we'll really need to extend that by collecting the E's to extend not only our firepower but also the width, quite much like a Pidia. Of course, this wouldn't be a Turrican game without the odd puzzle, and in this case it's a leap of faith. And do we drop down and see if we can do that, or do we just try it? And luckily we make it to the side, and it's those kinds of game mechanics which we'll just have to put up with as we try to fight our way through this game. The lore comprises of 3 unique worlds, and in each world we'll get 2 different levels. You can see on this very first level of this very first world some chains in the foreground and some things which remind us of, well, Turrican 3 actually, with items in the foreground. And we can also see some highly coloured graphics as we seem to be wandering through some kind of a basement. The second part of level 1 is identical to the first part with the same enemies and the same kind of design, and these levels are very much linear, unlike most of the Turrican series, and it's even more linear than Turrican 3 because we don't get to veer off the beaten track, and you can see enemies there. Some of those cannot be shot and cannot be killed, and so those mines, ball bearings, you just have to avoid them at all costs. Yes, I did notice that slight graphics crash, but this was a kind of rushed cover disc release, and they only got through 3 worlds before they abandoned it. And I think that this was released on a German magazine cover disc, although I'm not quite sure which one. And I also know that it was released as a budget title in Denmark, and so the producers of this game did get something for it, even though not much. And as we learned in our previous play guide to Super Gem Z, Kaiko did manage to survive this little encounter with a Turrican style game inspired by Factor 5, as most of them also worked with Factor 5 as well. On the main console, you can see our score is to the left and our lives are to the right of that. We have 5 lives at the moment. We have 1 continue, and you can see our current amount of energy. We are just 1 shy of the top spot, and it means that if we collect any more energy, it will give us some extra. And I think that was an extra life, and it didn't seem to register. Maybe we are only allowed 5 lives total, but whatever. You can see the player 2 score onto the right, and I don't think that there is 2 players simultaneous action in this game. See, the graphics are a huge step above public domain, and if this game would have been completed, I'm sure they could have got away with a full price release for this, because I think the graphics are highly polished, and you can see that every detail is preserved. We get a full wall in the background, not just a black background, and you can see, well, we've just lost our first life, and well, we did pick up an extra life, so we're still on 5 lives, so maybe it holds the lives in a bank after all. And we're rapidly getting towards the end of level 1 with this great Chris Hulsbeck music, and with the help, of course, of Rudolf Stemmer. Because we can't always see the lower levels, sometimes jumping onto the lower level is hazardous, and yet again, look at this, yet another leap of faith, and luckily we do get a double boost from our jetpack, but unluckily, sometimes if we hit our head on the roof, we'll collide with that, and other times we'll just disappear off the top of that screen. So sometimes the game doesn't actually play very fairly, and sometimes the controls aren't tight enough to rely on the double jump feature all the time. At the end of the first world, it will give us 2 exits, and as far as I know, both exits lead to exactly the same place, and maybe the game was supposed to branch off at that point. But let's venture on. This is the second world, and again, like Turrican games, this is another one themed like the H.R. Geiger Aliens worlds, and you can see that we have the familiar territory of aliens, and those are absolutely obscure aliens, of course, nothing to do with the movies. They appear to be firing cobwebs, which are lethal, of course, and so you'll have to avoid those. Luckily, we do not get a gyro ball to roll around the level. No, we'll simply have to crouch and make our way through. When we die, we'll lose 1 piece of firepower, and so we've gone down to still a rather meaty weapon, and that's good because we'll need that on this particular level. And you can see that this is comprised of another alien world where aliens jump up and down and around that level. But you don't have to shoot everything, all you have to do is to walk from A to B, and as long as you make it with some energy to spare, then that's the level complete. And you can see that this level is well designed, although it does use a very familiar tile set, but the music is rather well done once it gets going. Luckily there is a way to look down, and looking down isn't particularly easy. I think you have to hold down fire and pull back, but once that is activated you will be frozen unfortunately on that screen, and you can see it isn't centered either. So one knock of the enemies throws us down into an unlimited pit of death, and that means that we've just lost yet another life, and any lives that we had in reserve are rapidly melting away as we get through the hordes of aliens. And I wouldn't say that this particular level is hard, in fact I wouldn't say this game in general is hard, and without a time limit you can take your time and spend all day long trying to get through it. Like most of these types of games, it is possible to get around these and to try and get all those bonuses, and that's very tempting in the game, even though you are fighting above pits of death. And you can see some blue spiders' webs or whatever they may be in the top of the picture, and they also travel in the foreground to give us a semi-illusion of well, a 1.5D structure it may be. It's not even 3D, but yet again another leap of faith, and I really do not appreciate leaps of faith in a game like this, because it means you have to perform one of those things, and if you fail, of course, it's life over. It's not necessarily the double jump which kills us, but if we collide with any of the enemies on that platform, they will throw us back, and if they throw us back into the pit, then that's a needless life over. So we have to jump into the middle of those platforms gung-ho, and hopefully we can blow those enemies away before they throw us back and rob some health. And you can see that we are persevering along this level, and we haven't got to the hardest part yet, which requires more of those dangerous jumps. Luckily, most of the controls are very tight, and when the jumping works on cue, it is very responsive and it helps us get out of trouble. So even though this game is not absolutely perfect in the controlling department, it really does give us almost the opportunity to go wild and to really get used to the jumping into danger. and jumping into danger is something that you'll have to do in these games, and sometimes that's luck over judgment, but if you get into a rhythm, hopefully you can land on top of those enemies and dispatch them just like that. But you can see, unless we find some energy, or unless we pull off a double jump right there, we'll find another loss of life. This section of the game is notorious for killing players, and just like the Aladdin Special Edition Jumping Spikes Mondays that you might have seen, which was a comedy classic, you'll see me going off again and again and again at this particular spot because, well, it's very difficult, and I had to go through the entire game again after this and get back to the same spot after this. A bit like a Miss Mad Lemon review just to get to this spot, because actually this is not acceptable. I can do better, and I will do better a little bit later on. But for now, let's just absorb a few more of my mistakes, and this is how not to play this game under any given circumstances, because if you do, unfortunately you'll just drop into death, and that means that we are lacking in firepower and lacking in some kind of motivation when this thing keeps hammering away on our lives. When we lose all of our lives, we will gain the high score message, and those will appear, of course, on the title sequence. And so you can have a high score in this game if you score highly enough and score enough to get on to that high score table. And it's not particularly hard. Any veterans of the Turrican series watching this will probably be able to complete it in about 3 attempts, but as you can see, I'm making a meal of the double jump, which has to be done right on the edge of the platform, and you have to do a double jump precisely, and if you wander 1 pixel too far you'll fall off, and of course when that happens then you cannot do a single jump, never mind a double jump, and it's rather annoying, as you can see. But even though it is annoying, it is possible with a bit of perseverance, and there you go, we have now reached that platform across the other side. Again, it gives us multiple exits, and maybe one of those contains an extra life, but unfortunately we do not get to move on to World 3, we're still stuck in World 2, and by the time you get this far, of course it's fun playing it, and it's fun trying to master it, but I can't help feeling that some of these levels feel too familiar, and trying to get through these isn't hard enough to be memorable, and it's not easy enough to be an absolute doddle, and it falls somewhere like the adventures of Quik and Silva in that respect. Despite all of that, there is lots of action going on, and if you know how to play this game, you can march straight through it, maybe 30 minutes or so, and you can run straight through these enemies. Remember, we were held up slightly with the leap of faith, and we are being held up again by ridiculous jumps, and we have to go all the way back to the start of that level, which is a little bit unfair because the waypoints are very much spread out. But if you get far, at least it does give us a waypoint halfway through the level, of which we haven't seen yet. Another downside to this game is sometimes you'll find one of those tokens floating over a pit of death, and just like the first life scenario that we saw on the first level, sometimes it's possible to get those if you fall into the crystal and then do a jump straight after that. But as you can see, this crystal at the bottom of this particular pit would be difficult to hit. It only contains a power-up, so let's not bother. And let's just ignore those crystals, which are a bit of a headache. As long as you know how to avoid them, they shouldn't pose too much of a problem. Good news is we are rapidly getting towards the end of the 4th level in the second world of the 3 in this game, and yes, I have completed Metal Law before, and that high score was probably the result of that, but I've only ever played it once before and I'm hoping to complete it again. Unfortunately, I will not be doing so in this particular playthrough, but I'll get within about 3 screens of the end, so you're going to get to see 95% of it, and at least you'll get to see the end in case you want to complete this yourself. Just to make this game feel just a little bit longer, yes, we can explore all those corners, and it's well worth doing that because some of those contain extra lives, but there isn't really much exploration going on. But yes, just to make this game feel slightly longer, it gives us a loop back at the end, and now it's very easy to march straight through to the exit from here. And so this game really is for kids, and kids should be able to romp their way through it. But serious gamers will find this game lacking in many departments simply because it's too easy. And here we are, almost at the end of level 4 out of the 6 in this game, and this is only the second time I've actually tried it. World 3 things get going a little bit more, and you can hear some more pumping music and some great patterns on the wall, some great brickwork, and things reminding us of the Bitmap Brothers games. And yes, even the new bits on the RAM logo reminds us of the Bitmap Brothers logo, and this game was supposed to be an homage maybe to the Turrican series, and this came out before the official Turrican 3 released by Factory 5. So you can see that this had the roots of something, but in fact, even though this has amazing quality graphics, amazing quality sound, responsive controls and very easy gameplay, unfortunately there is something missing which the player will find simply playing it. And I found simply playing this, it appears to be halfway between commercial and public domain. Luckily it's on the right side of commercial, and I did enjoy playing this, and I'm sure you will as well. Jumping up and down on platforms like this reminds me of Shadow Dancer, where we had a dog and jumped up and down on platforms, and some of the extra little bits of goodies aren't easy to collect, and some of those aren't even worth it. But you can see on this particular section something which looks like a generator, and we somehow have to find our way through that generator just to pick up one single power-up of whatever it may be. And sometimes the time and the effort and the trouble of finding our way in simply takes too long for the ample result of one simple power-up. This last world reminds me a little of Yo-Jo and all those great platformers that we did manage to get on the Amiga. Even though very few of those are immaculate quality, we did get a handful, and you can see that full graphics use have been made of this game. It is an Amiga 500 game, this is not AGA, so they really have pushed the boat out in terms of their 16 colour graphics. At this stage, it's important to conserve as much of our health as possible, especially with all this action, and a bit later on we will see that that's the death of us, a section just like this, where you're supposed to shoot at the enemies in advance. If you don't, and you simply land on top of them, then you can have a knockback, and that knockback could be into, well, in this case energy, but usually it's a knockback into instant death. So let's see if we can at least get through to the end of level 5 of the 6 in this game. made it down to our last life, and I don't think we're going to complete this. And I think the last world comprises of one long level, not quite sure, but we are about halfway through it. So there's just one more section after this, and I don't think we're going to make it. This game was available for 1990 Deutschmarks, which is around 10 euros today, and I think at a budget price it would have been even better, maybe even less than that. Maybe in the €7 mark, maybe even $6.99, maybe even $5.99 actually, because there is really no substance to this game. And that's why I only got average scores, and Amiga Joker reviewed this game and awarded it 68%, and the LemonAmiga crew also gave it 6.5 out of 10, so that means the average score for this game is 6.5 out of 10. Thank you once again for viewing a play guide to Metal Law by Audios, aka New Bits on the RAM, and I hope you now understand how to play this. And if you like Turrican games and run and gun shooters, this isn't a bad one. Why not check this out and get the great feeling of completing it for yourself? And it's not bad, and it's certainly not the worst platformer on the Amiga. So thank you once again, and I hope to see you again for another game sometime soon. Thank you.